Aloha and mahalo for joining me. I'm Janet and welcome to the Call to Create podcast. I hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are. And what do you want to create? I'm here to talk about creativity and your heart and your mind. And I want to ask you, what do you want to create that's tangible and or intangible? Do you feel called to create a business? Are you feeling like you're called to create harmony in your home? Those are like the intangible things, like creating harmony, that you can't see it or touch it, but it exists and you can feel it. So what are you called to create? That is the question I want to ask you today, is before we get started on the topic I'm going to talk about, is what are you called to create? I want you to think about that every day, because it's important that you actually create something, because if you don't, you'll feel really stifled and frustrated. And I say that because I know that when I don't create, I get really frustrated. I have to do something, whether it's with fabric or paper or creating something that I can touch with my hands and use as scissors and all that kind of stuff. It's just really, really cool when I'm actually in that mode and I'm creating. And I want that for you. And if you've experienced that, you'll know what I'm talking about. And you just feel like time stops and you just can create and forget about everything else that's around you. Or you also forget about stress too, which is one of the benefits of creating. So think about that, because life is going by fast and we have to enjoy our life. And the topic I want to talk about in this episode are about the things that are preventing you from creating what you're meant to create. We're going to talk about things, not only physical things, but we're also going to talk about the intangible, because it exists and you need to talk about these things. I need to talk about these things. So what are the things that are preventing you from what you're meant to create? Is it time? I hear that a lot. I've used that excuse. Is it energy? Is it lack of ideas? Is it lack of money? Or is it fear of what other people will say? Is it that you feel like you're not creative enough? Do you feel like it doesn't really matter? Do you feel like you don't matter? Because those are the common things that I've heard for years. And those are some of the things that I've experienced too. And it can be really frustrating. And so let's talk about this time thing. And, I've used this as an excuse just because that was the easiest excuse to make. And it's usually the only excuse I'm telling myself, really. It's not to anybody else. But, when you think about time, it's very interesting that we always make time for the things that are most important to us, and things that are fun and things that we want to do that are easy. Like, for example, I've used this about going to a movie. When every year the major movie production companies, they try to come out with a new movie every year. And sometimes it's usually around the holidays. And they have this big preview before, and they show you, 1 minute snippet of parts of the movie, and it gets you all excited. So you make the time because you're so excited about it and it looks really interesting. You make the time to go and see this 2-hour movie. Sometimes the movies have been like 2.5 hours. But you're not only there for 2.5 hours, because you have to commute, you have to get dressed, get in the car or however you're going to get there, wait in line, all of that. So by the time you get home, sometimes it's 4 hours later. And that's why the excuse of time has no value as far as using it as an excuse, because you're always going to make time for something that's really important to you or something that you really want to do. And all the people I know have always gone to movies. So think about that. You cannot use time as an excuse, but you have to be able to feel, you have to be able to have that feeling in your heart and your mind that creating something is important and it has value. Okay, now I want to talk about the other excuse that I've used is energy as one of the reasons why I don't have time to create. Now, I've always struggled with like anemia, borderline anemia, off and on for a long time since I was a teenager. So I get tired really easy, and especially when I was working a full time job and then I would come home and sew for people, that is really hard because, yes, I'm using up all my energy. So there are times where I felt like I just don't have energy. I'm tired. I want to take a nap. But it comes back down to the same thing is that if it's important enough for you in your heart and your mind, you're going to find the energy and do and create what's meaningful to you or create what you have that feeling that you know you need to create. And it's worth it too. Okay, so now the other thing, the other excuse, because there's many, but I want to talk about is ideas. You could possibly feel like you don't have enough ideas. And that's not true at all because when I was teaching classes, I would always have the students think about what are the ways that you get your ideas from because everyone is different. Sometimes people have to look in magazines to get ideas. Sometimes people have to draw and color and just scribble with something to get the ideas flowing. Some people have to talk about it, talk it out. And then there were people who would have to hold things in their hands, whether it be scissors or paper or fabric or just, clay or anything. And then there were people who had to look online, look at ideas online. So everybody gets their ideas and gets their ideas differently and in different ways. So think about how you get your ideas and how you get the juices flowing because everyone is so different that you are not going to be able to get your creative ideas the same way as many, many other people. And that's what's so beautiful about people is that we're so different and we get ideas differently. So think about that. Think about how it works for you. And the next excuse I want to talk about is money. And yes, it is true. There have been times in my life where, especially early on in marriage, where I had all my kids and money was really tight. So there wasn't very much money at all to maybe buy the things that I wanted to make things or create. But I always did have something that I could use to create. And, you have to always remember to be resourceful. You can find and create things. You can always look for things that you have around you to create something. And there's probably people in your life who are getting rid of things or don't need things. You can always ask around to see if people don't need things because you have this idea you want to create something. And, there's always a way to create, even when you don't have money. Because creating doesn't have to always involve money. Because, like I said in the beginning of this episode, are you called to create harmony in your home? Are you called to do something that's intangible? So, for those reasons, you don't need any money at all, which is great. So, just open your mind and think about all the ways that you can create that doesn't involve money. Okay, and now I want to talk about the next excuse about why you can't create or that you give yourself for not creating is that you have fear of what people might say. Now, this is super, super common. This is probably like at the top of a lot of people's lists as far as having that fear because nobody wants to be judged. Nobody wants to have people say, oh, well, what are you doing? Well, that doesn't make sense, or that doesn't look nice, or that's dumb. And of course, I've heard a lot of things. I've heard a lot of people say crazy things to other people. And what really matters is what God wants you to create. It doesn't matter at all what other people will say, because in the end, like I like to tell my family, is that, in the end, we only have to answer to God for what we do. We never ever have to answer for what other people have done. So just remember that. If you have fear, I would say just let it go. Don't fear what other people are going to say to you, because it doesn't matter, because there's a purpose that you have a feeling to create something. It always benefits you and other people. And, just go for it. I would say just let go of the fear, because most of the times I've actually seen so many wonderful things that happen. People are so supportive when somebody creates something. So just remember that. Okay, and then the other excuse I want to talk about is not feeling creative enough. Okay, so this comes back down to a worthiness issue. When you feel like you don't have enough worth and value, you're always going to be thinking that you're not enough, that you're not creative enough, you're not smart enough, and all of the enoughs, which I would say that's enough. Don't let yourself go down that road. It's a very dark place, and don't go there, because remember, like I just said, is that you have to only care about what God thinks. Just worry about what God thinks about you. Don't worry about feeling like you're enough, you're good enough, because if you live your life according to what other people are going to say and think about you, whether you're enough or you're thinking that you're not good enough for someone, or you're not good enough, doesn't that make you crazy when you keep hearing that enough thing, that enough word? Like, it just is frustrating and it's not worth it. You have to just go with what you're feeling inside. You have to remember that God gives you these feelings to create something for a reason. And so just do it. Okay, now there are dozens and dozens of other reasons, but the last one I want to talk about is that you feel like it doesn't matter, or you feel like you don't matter. And I felt like that too. I still kind of feel like that off and on. It depends what's going on in my life too. And it's interesting because when you feel like you don't matter, it really affects your whole life. Like everything you do in your life, it affects that, because you operate from that place of not feeling like you matter. So when you do things, maybe you don't do it all the way, or you don't do a good job, or you don't even do it because you feel like, whatever, I don't care. Because when you're not feeling like you matter, or no one cares enough about you, then it's really hard to be able to do things that are important to you, that you just let it go because you have that feeling and it's so strong. And sometimes it can just suck the life out of you. Okay, now remember, I'm talking from experience, and it's not pretty, but we all are gonna struggle. We have to have our struggles and our weaknesses, because that's an opportunity for us to learn and grow and find out what we're made of. Find out what our strengths are and what our weaknesses are that we can work on overcoming. So if you feel like you don't matter, I want to challenge you on that. I want you to turn to God and ask God to help you if what you're thinking about yourself is true or not. Because I can guarantee that God will probably tell you that if you're feeling like you're not good enough and you don't matter, that's false. Okay, because you were created by God and you matter just because you were created by God. So remember that. Don't use any of these excuses. And if you have more excuses that I haven't mentioned, then just let that all go, and remember that you have worth and value, and I'm here to remind you about that. And you are called to create something, and get your heart and your mind together on the same page, and go with that feeling of what you're called to create. Because that's when your life becomes so full and you'll start to feel joy and all the things that really make life worth living. And yes, it's going to be a struggle. And that's why I'm here on this podcast to help you with all this personal development so that you can change and grow and become a better person. Because we all want to become better. Nobody wants to stay where they are, where you're feeling stuck and feeling not good enough and all of that. So just remember these things. I want you to think about it. Think about all these things that are preventing you from creating what you're meant to create. So think about this because you have worth and value. And I really appreciate you being here. I thank you so much. And if you could, please share this podcast episode with anyone who you know would need to hear it or who you know would get great value out of listening to this. And if you could, please rate and review this podcast. I would appreciate it. You can review it in the Apple Podcast app and let me know your thoughts and your comments too. I love to hear the things that you're thinking about. And have a great day. Aloha.